Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today I am at the Tibet Butler Nature Preserve in Orlando, Florida. I'm only a couple miles northeast of Disney, but I didn't know there was going to be a historical marker here, and since there is, we're going to check it out, check out the nature and the area around it, and learn a little something today. I love finding historical markers, especially when I wasn't expecting to find one, and learning a little something about the history of the place where I am. I hope you enjoy this video. Recently, I went on a hike at the Tibet Butler Nature Preserve in Orlando, Florida, and stumbled upon a historical marker that I was not expecting for Hernando de Soto. I vaguely thought I remembered this name from many years ago in my school history classes, but I couldn't remember a single thing about him other than that he was a Spanish explorer and conquistador. As a school-age kid, none of that information resonated with me, but as an adult, realizing I am standing in the exact path of someone big enough to make it into the history books for centuries after his time, I think this is the perfect opportunity to brush up on my history and appreciate the land on which I'm walking for its historical significance. In today's video, we are just going to have a crash course on Hernando de Soto. Hernando de Soto lived from 1497 until 1542 and was involved in many expeditions on behalf of Spain as an explorer and a conquistador. He is remembered for his expeditions of Nicaragua, the Yucatan Peninsula, and Peru. However, he is best known for leading the first European expedition deep into the territory of the modern-day United States, traveling through Florida, Georgia, Alabama, North and South Carolina, Mississippi, and most likely also Arkansas. He is also the first European documented to cross the Mississippi River. De Soto's North American expedition was a vast undertaking. He was searching for both gold, which had been reported by various North American tribes and other coastal explorers, and also for a passageway to China, or at least to the Pacific coast. De Soto ultimately died on the banks of the Mississippi River, although sources disagree on the exact location, probably somewhere around Lake Village, Arkansas, or Faraday, Louisiana. Historians have tried to trace the exact route of De Soto's North American expedition for years, which has been a controversial process. Local politicians have vied to have their localities associated with the expedition. The most widely used version of De Soto's trail comes from a study commissioned by the United States Congress chaired by anthropologist John R. Swanton, who published the final report of the United States De Soto Expedition Commission in 1939. In this hypothesis, Manatee County, Florida, is claimed to be the approximate landing site for De Soto, and there is a national memorial there to recognize the event. According to Wikipedia, the De Soto expedition goes like this. In May of 1539, Hernando de Soto landed 9 ships with over 620 men and 220 horses in an area generally identified as South Tampa Bay, possibly at either the Charlotte Harbor or San Carlos Bay. De Soto named the land Espiritu Santo after the Holy Spirit. The ships carried priests, craftsmen, engineers, farmers, and merchants. Some of them brought their families, some of them were from Cuba, but most of the men were from Europe or Africa. Very few of these men had ever traveled outside of their home villages. Let me apologize here that I'm going to be mispronouncing many of the names and tribes in this video. I'm not quite sure how some of them are supposed to be pronounced. But near the port of entry, a party found Juan Ortiz, a Spaniard who was living with the Mocoso people. Ortiz had been captured by the Uzita while searching for a lost expedition, and later he escaped to the Mocoso tribes. Ortiz had learned the Timucuan language and was able to serve as an interpreter to De Soto as he traversed the Timucuan-speaking areas on his route. De Soto's men distrusted Ortiz because he refused to dress in the Hidalgo uniform. However, De Soto remained loyal to Ortiz and allowed him his freedom to dress as he wanted and live among his native friends. The Spaniards captured other Native Americans to use for slave labor. The expedition traveled north from their landing spot, exploring Florida's west coast and encountering native ambushes and conflicts along the way. De Soto's army seized the food stored in villages, captured women to be used as slaves for his soldiers, and forced the men and boys to serve as guides and bearers. His army fought 2 battles with the Timucua groups, resulting in heavy Timucua casualties. After defeating the warriors, De Soto had 200 more executed in what was called the Napatuca Massacre, the first large-scale massacre by Europeans in the current United States. One of De Soto's most important battles with the natives, along with his conquest of Florida, was a 1539 battle with Chief Vitichuco. Unlike other native chiefs who entered into peace with the Spanish, Vitichuco did not trust them and had secretly plotted to kill De Soto along with his army. Vitichuco was betrayed by the interpreters, and De Soto struck first, killing thousands of natives in the process. Those that survived were surrounded and cornered by woods and water. In a matter of 3 hours, thousands more were killed. The approximately 900 who survived took refuge in the swamps, where they continued to fight while swimming. Most of them eventually surrendered, but after 30 hours in the water, only 7 men remained and were dragged out by the Spanish. De Soto's first winter encampment was at Anahaica, the capital of the Apalachee people in the panhandle of Florida, and this is one of the few places on the route where archaeologists have found physical traces of his expedition. After riding out the winter and having heard of gold being mined, quote, towards the sun's rising, the expedition turned northeastward towards the modern-day state of Georgia. Based on archaeological finds made in 2009, researchers believe that De Soto's expedition stopped in Telfair County near the Ocmulgee River. Artifacts found here include 9 glass trade beads, some of which bear a chevron pattern made in Venice and believed to be indicative of the De Soto explorers. 6 metal objects were also found, including a silver pendant and some iron tools. The rarest items were found within what researchers believe used to be a large council house of the indigenous people with whom De Soto was visiting. From there, the expedition continued on to present-day South Carolina, where they were recorded as being received by a female chief who gave her tribes pearls, food, and other goods to the Spanish soldiers. However, much to their disappointment, the expedition did not find any gold. They turned north towards the Appalachian Mountains in present-day western North Carolina, where they spent a month resting the horses while the men again searched for gold. Next, they entered Tennessee, and at this point, it's not certain whether De Soto continued along the Tennessee River and entered Alabama from the north, or if he turned south and entered northern Georgia. Either way, the expedition spent another month in the Coosa chiefdom, a vassal to Tuscaloosa. Then they prepared to turn south and head towards the Gulf of Mexico. Are we really changing this name to the Gulf of America? I am too old for this. And that's where they planned to meet with 2 ships bringing in fresh supplies from Havana, Cuba. De Soto demanded women and servants from Tuscaloosa. When Tuscaloosa refused, the explorers took him hostage and began making plans to leave. Tuscaloosa had a change of heart and gave in to De Soto's demands, providing the women and bearers for the Spaniards. He told De Soto that his crew would have to go to his town of Manila, a fortified city in southern Alabama, to receive the women. De Soto gave the chief a pair of boots and a red cloak to reward him for his cooperation. However, the Mobilian army, under Chief Tuscaloosa, ambushed the De Soto army. During a 9-hour encounter, about 200 Spaniards died and 150 more were badly wounded. 20 more died during the next few weeks. However, the Spaniards killed an estimated 2,000 to 6,000 Native Americans at Mobila, making the battle one of the bloodiest in recorded Native American history. The Spaniards lost most of their possessions and supplies in the battle and nearly a quarter of their horses. They were wounded and sick, surrounded by enemies, and left without equipment in an unknown territory. De Soto feared that word of this disaster would reach Spain if he reached the supply ships in the bay coming from Cuba, so instead he led his men away from the Gulf Coast inland towards Mississippi, most likely near present-day Tupelo, to spend the winter trying to recover and recoup. The following spring, De Soto demanded 200 men from the Chickasaw to act as porters. The Chickasaw refused the demand and instead attacked the Spanish camp during the night. The expedition moved on towards the Mississippi River, but De Soto had very little interest in the river, which he viewed as an obstacle to his mission. He did manage to cross the river, although the exact location where he was able to cross has been considerably researched and debated. He possibly traveled down to Charlie's Trace, which has been used as a trail through the swamps of the Mississippi Delta, and spent a month building flatboats. He would probably have had to cross the river at night to avoid Native Americans who patrolled the river, as De Soto continued to maintain hostile relations with the native peoples in the area. Once across the Mississippi, the expedition continued traveling westward through Arkansas, Oklahoma, and Texas, surviving a particularly harsh winter in Altiamique on the Arkansas River. In the spring of 1541, the expedition decamped and moved on erratically. Their interpreter, Juan Ortiz, had died, making it even more difficult for them to get directions, communicate with the natives, and find food sources. They went as far inland as the Caddo River, where they clashed with a Native American tribe called the Tula in October. The Spaniards characterized the Tula as the most skilled and dangerous warriors they had ever encountered. Eventually, they turned around and returned to the Mississippi River. Hernando de Soto died of a fever in May of 1542 in the native village of Wauchova. Historical sources disagree on precisely where this is, possibly Lake Village or MacArthur, Arkansas, or also possibly Faraday, Louisiana. At the time of his death, De Soto was in possession of 4 Indian slaves, 3 horses, and 700 hogs. His expedition had explored what the Spanish were referring to as La Florida for 3 years, without finding the expected treasures, gold, or even a hospitable site for colonization. They lost nearly half their men and most of their horses. By this point, all of the soldiers were wearing animal skins for clothing, and most were injured or in poor health. The men generally came to a consensus to end the expedition and try to find a way home. The route they ultimately chose was to head overland across modern-day Texas towards the Spanish colony of Mexico City. They faced many hardships and skirmishes with natives along the way, and had an extremely difficult time finding enough food to feed the remaining men left in the army. Of the 700 recorded participants at the start of the expedition, the commonly accepted figure of survivors is 311. Most of the men chose to stay in the New World and settled down in Mexico, Peru, Cuba, and other Spanish colonies. The Spaniards believed that De Soto's excursion to Florida was a failure because they had acquired neither gold nor prosperity, and they had founded no colonies. But the expedition had several other major consequences that were not so readily obvious at that time. It contributed to the process of the Columbian Exchange, For instance, some of the hogs brought by DeSoto escaped and became the ancestors of the feral razorback pigs in the southeastern United States today. The expedition was instrumental in contributing to the development of a hostile relationship between many Native American tribes and the Europeans. When his expedition encountered hostile natives in the new lands, more often than not it was DeSoto's own men who instigated the clashes. Even more devastating than the battles were the diseases which may have been carried by members of the expedition, although this is a topic that has been questioned by some scholars. Because the indigenous people lacked the immunity which the Europeans had acquired through generations of exposure to these Eurasian diseases, the Native Americans suffered epidemics of illness after exposure to measles, smallpox, and chickenpox. Several areas traversed by the expedition became depopulated by disease caused by contact with the Europeans. Also seeing the high fatalities and devastation that contact was causing, many natives fled from their populated areas for the surrounding hills and swamps, which caused massive changes to their social structure. On the bright side, the records of this expedition contributed greatly to European knowledge about the geography, biology, and ethnology of the New World. The DeSoto expedition's description of North American natives are the earliest known source of information about the societies in the Southeast. They are the only European description of the culture and habits of North American native tribes before these people encountered other Europeans. These men were both the first and nearly the last Europeans to witness the villages and civilization of the Mississippian culture.
Okay, everybody, I hope you enjoyed that little bitty bite-sized history lesson. I sure did. I love finding historical markers, especially when I didn't expect to find them. I just pulled up to the Tibet Butler Nature Preserve to do all of the hiking trails and did not expect there to be a marker here, so that just kind of made my morning even more special. I did do all of the hiking trails here. If you want to check out that video, I have already posted it as a hike with me video. But when I found out there was a historical marker here, I knew it deserved a video all of its own. I absolutely love learning a little bit of history about the places that I go and where I live. So thank you for watching this video. I'll see you all another day in another adventure. Bye, guys.